Hello. Welcome back to our fifth and final installment of Vitality. Today, me and Brian are going to be going over INP and TBT. And if you're not sure what all that means, it will all be explained in due time today. So appreciate everybody being here. This is like I said, the fifth and final one in this Vitality series. We have an entire playlist set up of all the videos I've done with Brian, all of our Perfmatters related content, and everything inside this series. So I'll make sure to add that link inside this description. But if you just go to the Admin Bar's YouTube channel and click on the playlist, you'll see that playlist in there. So if you missed any of these and want to do some catch up, those are all there. Also, Brian has shared the slides for all the ones we've done in the past. We've turned those into blog posts on the adminbar.com. So you can go there and get the slides. You can get kind of like a blog post version of the presentation so you can see everything. I found it really handy as like a checklist when I'm going and having to debug some issues or whatever. Instead of having to scrub through an hour and a half long video, I can go through one of those checklists and kind of remind myself all the things I need to look at. So definitely some awesome resources come out of this. And I can't thank you enough for doing this, Brian. We'll give it just 1 minute here to make sure everybody can see and hear us okay. So if you can hear me okay, if you'll let me know in the chat, there's a nice little delay for that. But I want to make sure that's all good before we get going. While I do, I want to remind everybody, you can go to brianleejackson.com and sign up for Brian's newsletter. I hear the next issue is coming out very shortly. So if you head over there right away, you can get signed up and hopefully get on that today. We also have a 20% off coupon for Perfmatters. So if you go to perfmatters.io and use the code TheAdminBar, that'll save you 20% on Perfmatters. That is a staple in my starter site. So it goes on every single site I own or manage or have built. There was actually, I don't know if you caught it this week, Brian, there was a thread in the group about, it was just like a dedicated thread to like loving Perfmatters and how much we all love it. So
oh really? I didn't opt to, as you know, I don't really go on Facebook groups just
yeah.
But yeah, I'll have to go check that out unless someone tags me. Sometimes then I see stuff.
Yeah, I thought about tagging you, but I got busy this week. All right. And then we also we're going to try to take questions and answers. We've done this at the end of every call. I would encourage you, like if you have a site where there's INP or TBT problems, pull that site up, run a speed test on it, go through some of these things with us. If you run into issues, you might want to do that on a staging site or something. You know, there's some things that are more dangerous to do live while you're only half paying attention than others. But if you have questions during that process, now's a great time to have those questions because we have Brian right here. You can drop those in the chat if you use #Q for those questions. I'm just going to be saving those. I have a little system on the back end here where I can star those questions, and we'll come around to all those at the end of the stream. So, and then, of course, if you enjoy this, give the stream a like. We would really appreciate it. That helps make sure more people see it. So let's see. Checking the comments here. I see no comments. So either they can't hear us or they're just not paying attention to us. One of the two. I hear us coming through loud and clear, so I think we'll call that good. Excellent. All right. So anything you want to add before I share your screen? Are you ready to get into this, Brian?
Yeah, I think we're ready to go.
Let's do it. All right. There we go. I'll let you take it from here, and I'll move this banner out of the way so we can see everything, and we'll jump in.
Okay. So yeah, INP and TBT. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to start this with, there's a lot of technical stuff in here, probably more than the other presentations, just because these are a little harder to understand. I've used some funny examples in a few places to try to dumb it down. Even for myself, like I've had to reread some things, and you might have to go back and reread some of this. But so interaction to paint is a core Web Vitals metric, and basically it measures the web page's responsiveness, or you could say latency, from when a user interacts with the page to when the browser reflects that interaction visually. So I like to just always use the example of the mobile menu on a WordPress site. You know, you click it, there's some JS that's happening, some delay time, and then it paints and shows you the menu. So that's the easiest way to kind of picture what's happening with INP stuff. And there's a video here. So this includes mouse clicks, taps, and key presses, essentially. Scrolling and hovering are not measured. It's basically just like clicks and taps on the phone. And this video here is, so basically the one on the left is that it's actually so slow that that they're clicking it again, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because it was too slow. So they're thinking, and then it goes back, and then it's kind of an endless loop of horrible user experience. So you've probably all experienced that. Yeah, at some point, especially on those big news sites like, Forbes or lots of those sites have similar issues like this. And so that's basically why Google wants you to fix it, because it's just horrible user experience. It is classified as an official core Web Vitals metric as of March 2024. So it is the most recent thing that Google has done. And this replaced first input delay. And FID was basically all about that first click. This is now actually measuring clicks all over the place throughout the page time. And we'll go into that more here, but you'll see how it's a lot different than just first input delay. And again, I always like to mention this. Only INP, LCP, and CLS are official metrics that you're passing or failing that green or red on. Every other metric like TBT, FCP, even TBT, which we're going to go over, those are all notable metrics, which are just something that might impact these other ones. But again, some people think everything in the PHP at Insight test, they must pass or fail. That's not true. It's really these three are the most important that you're wanting to focus on. And why is it important? Of course, as we said, user experience. If you have really high TBT, it's just going to feel really bad when you're bouncing around the site. Okay, so INP components. So the graph there's three components in the graph. This is from Google, but it kind of shows you the order of things. First, you have your input delay with an event handler that fires, processing time, it's like callback functions for the event, and presentation delay. It's when the event handler finishes and the browser presents the frame. So basically you click menu, there's input delay, processing time, you get that to render, and then the paint of the menu. And all of this is JS, keep in mind here. Pretty much everything with INP is JS. And I want to talk about event handlers and event listeners. This might be something you've never heard of, or it might be something you've heard of and never knew what it was. But essentially, this is running on every WordPress site out there, even though you might not know it. So you have three things: events, event listeners, and event handlers. So an event is a button click on a web page. It's the easiest way to think about it. And I'm using these funny examples of like a chef in a restaurant. You'll see these later too, but the easier way to understand it is, so like the example for that is like the oven timer buzzes in a kitchen restaurant. So then you have the event listener. This is JS code that's set up to watch for the button click. So example would be like the kitchen assistant who's always alert, like waiting to hear the timer. It's always just there waiting. And then event handler, which is the function that runs when the button is actually clicked, which might then change the text of the button, show a message, trigger an action. And then the example for that is the assistant alerts the chef. Then the chef turns off the oven, takes the dish out, prepares the service. So that's where a lot of the work is happening, is the event handler. So, and it might be hard to see here, but right here, again, this is all just that. If you look at the inline code of your site, you're probably going to see a lot of JS that you don't know what it is, perhaps. But there's lots of these event listeners just constantly listening on a page. And then you have these event handlers that kick off when you're initiating the actions. So all these dynamic events on your site have these things going on. And if you're curious about maybe your own site, there is a tab in Chrome DevTools you can pull up that actually show you how many event listeners you have on a page. So in this example here, I can see there's like Gravity Forms has a few event listeners here running. So like on a contact page, they probably have event listeners running, waiting for you to interact with some of those dynamic elements like the calendar picker, stuff like that happening. And then JS fires when you click on them. So, and the reason we're diving into all this is because this is where TBT and blocking the main thread comes into play, and that impacts INP. And we'll go into TBT and blocking thread and all this stuff. But basically, the more extensive these tasks are, the more time is spent, more CPUs involved, and that's what causes more delay when you're clicking on things. And the more delay, basically, the more INP can happen. So that's a lot. That was a mouthful.
The examples are actually really, really helpful for dummies like me. Now I can picture everything that's going on, so I appreciate that being in there.
Yeah, that was helpful for me as well, because and event listeners and handlers are something, if you're not a developer, really doesn't ever come up. Right. Like I'm sure lots of people listening right now have never even heard of those terms. but those are running on every single website that you're working on. So again, it's all just JavaScript. So what is good INP? So according to Google, they want you to have your INP under 200 milliseconds. And again, like most of the other metrics, they use the 75th percentile. So you don't have to get everything under there, but if you get 75% of all the crawls under 200 milliseconds, they'll put you in the green, essentially. And then remember that they're using throttled connections for a lot of this stuff. So you kind of want to aim for as low as possible, obviously, because you're going to have people with slower internet, slower connections. And so you're going to get, high variances in different places with some of this stuff. Okay, so measuring INP. In the past presentations, we've mentioned the real user data stuff, but in this one, it's probably more important than any of those other ones. So in a PageSpeed Insights test, you have your lab data at the bottom, and then in this screenshot, this is what the real data is at the top. And this is the data that's collected over the past 28 days, and it's recorded for Core Web Vitals. So unlike the other ones, though, there is no lab data for INP. Like there's nothing at the bottom that's live tested showing you INP. So that makes this one of the trickier ones because we got to use some other methods to kind of find INP and where it's coming from. So there's only real user data essentially. And then you think about why, and it makes sense because it requires data for multiple user interactions on the page to determine where the longest INP your duration is. So like think you have a contact page, you have multiple elements kicking off. You have a mobile menu at the top. You got maybe a slider going back and forth. Like there's lots of things that could cause INP in different places, and one might be slower than the other. So it's hard to just say like with LCP, you have one LCP image, and then that's kind of where they're measuring that for the lab data.
Right.
Whereas with INP, it could be this. So, and they're looking at all of that over time. So that's why there's no lab data. And then I know we've mentioned this before too, but you always want to pay attention to this little tab here, origin versus this URL. This URL is showing you what's on this page for the real user data. Origin will be the entire site user data, so the average across the whole site. And again, if you don't have enough traffic, you might not see any real user data at all. So that could make it even like if you want to optimize for INP on a brand new site, that might be actually a little tricky because you might not have any data to even go off of or know where your INP is at that state in time. However, some of the tools we'll dive into here later you can kind of get an idea if you're on a brand new site.
I'm guessing too, since most of us aren't writing a bunch, some people are, but most of us aren't writing a bunch of JavaScript for our own sites that are using WordPress and plugins and all this. A lot of this probably is up to your stack and what plugins you've added to the website and what features you're adding to it. So I'm sure that becomes very important, like what tools you're deciding to add.
Yeah. And we'll get into this too, because unfortunately there's some ways to improve INP, but unfortunately it's harder to fix than like LCP or things where we literally, walk you through a checklist of like, do this, you can do this. INP, like you said, if you have a bad plugin with bad JS running, like an optimization plugin like Perfmatters, that's not going to fix it. Your JS is still going to be bad. And even delaying it won't fix it because it can still be interacted at any time on the page. So what you're running really, really matters for INP. And third-party networks really matter too. So we'll go into that a little later too, but it's not just on-site stuff.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, so how to measure INP. So like we said before, since it's only real user data, essentially, like how do you test it? So here's a few methods that I've kind of used since March, because even developers like me are since March are like having to learn like how do you test this? What's the best tricks to figure out where it's coming from? Like there's all this stuff, and for LCP and all these other ones, we've had kind of years to figure out our best little methods on our own workflows. But for this one, when they launched it, it was kind of like a blank box for everybody to be like, oh, wow, we got to go figure this INP thing out. So PageSpeed Insights, great way to grab the real user data at the top there if you're passing or failing. But again, that's just pretty basic stuff in PageSpeed Insights. So INP debugger tool from Debug Bear. This is pretty handy actually. Now it won't pick up everything, but what they do is they do actually initiate like 5 or 6 clicks on a page. So they're kind of giving you lab data that's kind of faked, but
Sure.
in the best way that's possible. And it's kind of like a good alternative if you wanted some lab data. So here in this example, I was using like Perfmatters here, but they identified the cookie prompt thing as one of the highest INP things, which makes sense because it's, you're clicking on it, you got to wait. There's some little JavaScript, you got to wait for it to disappear, stuff like that's happening. So, and then they also identified the mobile menu, the top right of on the mobile site too. So, and they will tell you like the interaction. So like if it's a click, and then the duration of that time. But again, if you think about, Generate Press's mobile menu, like there's not a lot you can do to like optimize that itself. So that's why it's very tricky with some of this stuff. And like that cookie thing, like you want to get maybe the cookie solution you're using itself, like maybe they need to be better optimized. Like, so a lot of this comes down to like quality things. Now, as you can see here, the mobile menu on the Generate Press site here was 32 milliseconds, which is well under it's perfect. It's a great time actually. So it's not saying that like this is bad here, but the bad offenders will be 250 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds spikes with that. And I will bring over my screen here because I just have a longer example here. So this is, I just ran my workup blog site here, but you can see I just wanted to show like they do go through, click 5 or 6 times and show you multiple things here going on. So it's a great tool to be like, just grab the data, and perhaps at least give you an idea of where the worst offender is. That's the whole goal, kind of.
At least it gives you something to go off of if you are making tweaks or adjustments or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You can see if you're making progress in the right direction without waiting 28 days.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And even after 28 days, like PageSpeed Insight's not going to tell you anything about where it's coming from. So, even after that, you're like, well, where do I start? So yeah. So I would start with INP debugger. Again, not 100% accurate, but they do the best job I've seen of any tool trying to kind of give you something. Next is Google Search Console. This I always tell people, like, if you don't have this hooked up, hook it up right away, because there's so much good data in there. And if you're wondering which URLs are failing INP, like it will tell you all the URLs that are failing, like INP, LCP, all these metrics. Like you can go down and drill down all the URLs. It is very helpful for seeing like where it's happening. So definitely utilize Google Search Console. Another cool tool that I don't see people talking about, but is the CRUX, stands for User Experience Dashboard. This is from Chrome data that they're using from the crawling stuff. And I'm going to pull it up because that screenshot doesn't really do it justice here. But this is, and you can use this for any core Web Vitals metric, so LCP, CLS, INP, but you can see over time, and I'm just using I forget what site I had this on. This might be our workup blog or something, but you can see over time the bad INP, what's okay, and then what's in the green. So a great way to see it all in one place, like even better than Google Search Console. And you can see the trend too. Like, are you making progress on it? Is it getting worse? So yeah, this is great. I recommend using it for all the metrics too. It's great. TBT's in here, FCP, everything.
And that goes back to like that 75th percentile, because I see you do have like, in August there was 6.39 that were in the red, right? But because 83% are passing, you're good.
Yep. And again, even on my side, like say I clear the cache, something's slow, something's a bad network, someone's hitting it. Yeah, there's so many variances that can impact it. So like that's why I say you're never going to get this stuff to 100%. Like,
gotcha.
So
that's good to know for people like me that will freak out and just keep trying to do it until everything looks perfect.
Yeah. So, and again, if this one is, seems to be trending, I guess, in the better direction. I will say to Chrome, the Chrome team is also making improvements every month. I've seen it every month like clockwork to INP. to help make it like less penalizing for folks, because they see like other instances of like, wow, this might be literally impossible for someone to fix. So like their tools are also getting better and less penalizing to you over time a little bit. So let's see. Okay, so some other things here. Chrome Dev Tools just rolled out in Chrome 129, which I think came out last month. So like you might not even have the newest one yet, but they rolled out some really cool new features. And it's kind of wonky in Chrome because of the spacing. So I'm not going to pull it up in Chrome, but I'm going to go to there. I have it linked here for that tutorial, but I'll just show you some screenshots here. But basically, you pull up Chrome Dev Tools. Hopefully you can see that. Let me see. Let me zoom in here a little bit. But basically, you pull up Chrome Dev Tools, and you can bounce around your site, and it will actually update the INP on the fly. Now, this is something that never existed before in DevTools. And you can click around your site and see here, it'll actually show you the actions happening and the INP associated. And you can also throttle your site. So you can say like, put me on a mobile device, 4G, slow or something, and then click around your site. Now, again, it's, you get so many variances because you're only looking at one page, or, I mean, you can go to multiple pages, but again, it's, you can only do so much when you're looking at one thing at a time. So, but again, it's way better than what we had before in Chrome DevTools, which was almost nothing. So, utilize that because it's a great way to just identify things if you're clicking around a site. I think there was one other thing I wanted to show in here.
And that feels nice if you're just trying to figure out what is the thing on the page that's giving me problems, If you go around and click around, that's got to be helpful.
And they also, it's not just INP too. They do so you can click your LCP element and see what the LCP element is. So tons of great stuff in here. It's one of the best Chrome Dev Tools. Oh yeah, this is was only this show, but just further down on the interactions, you can see what's happening here. It will show, and it will just keep logging them as you click around, basically. I've noticed it's a little wonky sometimes still, but again, it's brand new. They just rolled it out. So I would just keep that in mind if you're needing another tool to test. Check that out. The tutorials will be in the slide here. You can go read how to use it if you've never used Chrome Dev Tools before. And then recording trace for individual INP interactions. So that's the screenshot here. That gets really, really technical. And even I don't use that a lot myself. Sometimes I do, but I'm not going to go into that here. You can, go to Chrome DevTools website and get tutorials on that if you really want to go that far into it. And then Lighthouse tab and time span traces. Again, that's going back into the trace data, but there is this one thing I will mention. If you're using trace data, again, this is for those technical folks out there. There is this new really cool tool this guy just launched. Again, all these new tools are thinking of INP, which is helpful because it's something that's hard to track sometimes. But basically, if you go and do a trace data in Chrome DevTools, it's a new tool called perflab.io. Some guy just launched it. It's free to sign up for. I think it's technically in beta right now, but you can basically load up a trace from Chrome DevTools in here, and it will actually give you a lot more data that Chrome DevTools doesn't do, and it kind of dumbs it down as far as see, he has INP stuff here, and you can hover over things and see what's causing the INP. I definitely recommend checking this out if you're playing around with Chrome DevTools, the perflab.io.
Excellent. And I just dropped that link in the chat too.
Okay, next, there are a few Chrome extensions you can use to measure INP. There's the Site Speed Chrome extension from Debugbear, and then there was the Web Vitals Chrome extension. However, as of January 2025, they just made this announcement 2 nights ago that they're actually discontinuing that because of the changes they made in the DevTools in Chrome. Mm-hmm. So basically, before this Chrome extension would kind of log the data live while you're clicking around. And essentially that's what Chrome DevTools does now. And it does it much better. So they're kind of getting rid of the Chrome extension, just going, if you're going to do this, look in Chrome DevTools, it's all there now. So I thought I'd leave that in there though, because it is still active, and it, I actually liked how they displayed things here. But good news is, they are working on adding more data in the Chrome DevTools tab. So subpart times, the 3 components. So like, I don't know if you can see it here, but like that input delay, processing time, like those will be kind of in the Chrome DevTools tab as well. And then script attribution. And I'll go into that here later on, why that's important.
It's not like Google to kill something off, getting rid of the browser extension. They never get rid of anything.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, never. Next one. Okay. And again, sorry I'm spending so much time on measuring it, but like most of INP, because it's so hard to sometimes fix, it's really important to figure out where it's coming from first off.
Right.
So like, because if you need to make a change on your site, say like a plugin change, like you need to know like what plugin to change. So yeah, while all these previous things I just went over can be useful to spot like really bad things, like pop out and give you an idea of where to start, the best way to measure all this stuff is to use a real user monitoring tool, which is referred to as a RUM tool. And essentially that's what Core Web Vitals real user data is. It's just essentially just a RUM tool. It's showing you data over time throughout the whole site. The downside is these tools aren't cheap either. However, there are a couple free trials for some of these, so I'll go into that here too. But basically how it works with the RUM tool is you install the tool or the script on your site. You just let it run continuously. It's going to monitor all the interactions over a period of time. And this will basically mimic the real user data in PageSpeed Insights because it's tracking everything, not just a single interaction. Behind the scenes, all these tools use, like, there's this thing from Chrome, like the long animations frame API, which basically helps you identify exactly which scripts are contributing to the render delays. And they'll let you drill down. Because of this, they'll let you drill down more specifically into the elements, actions, everything that's happening. So a couple of these tools I recommend if you're looking. Debugbear, always my favorite. I think I've mentioned them in every presentation. Might as well just be a show for Debugbear at this point, but I love what they're doing with their tool. Very helpful. Speed Curve, another great one that's doing some really cool stuff. They do some really great marketing too. New Relic is another one. And then Cloudflare just kind of started getting into this RUM data stuff. Theirs is very, very basic. And right now, I actually ran it the other night to see. It will show you like the URLs and like what your INP is, but it won't really show you any drill downs yet. So it might not be super helpful, as you can kind of get that data from Source Console already. But again, they are going, I'm sure Cloudflare, you will see like them drilling down into this stuff later on.
I'm guessing that's in like the paid Cloudflare plans.
This RUM stuff is in the free one right now.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if they will split it up later for more detailed stuff, but I hope not. But yeah, it's in there. You can go test RUM data right now on Cloudflare free. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this presentation anywhere, but I will say this now since I'm thinking of it. Any of these RUM tool scripts do impact performance, ironically. Mm-hmm. So when you're running them, like you maybe want to run it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a month, and then turn it off because it is constantly going everywhere. So
probably update your privacy policy too.
And yeah, I didn't think about that with cookies. I'm not even sure what they're doing with cookies. So like, yeah, you definitely want to think about that as well. Again, yeah, Debugbear, my favorite tool. They do have Debugbear has a 14-day free trial, no credit card required, which I really like. So at least you can go and run theirs for 2 weeks and get all the data that you can if you're troubleshooting a site that you need to figure out. And yeah, and I said you'll get more data with this than any of those other previous methods. So a few quick things Debugbear can help you find. And I actually ran one. Let me pull that up. So I just ran one on workup I didn't run it very long. I only had I think I have a week and a half of data in here. So keep that in mind. Again, their tools are very expensive. So even I didn't want to technically pay for this. You can go look at their prices. When I say expensive, they're not cheap. But again,
I
it's
offered
because
to put that bill for you, and I didn't even look at the price.
and I didn't want you to put that bill, so that's why I did the trial. So
you've given a lot to the admin bar, so I'm happy to do it if I could have.
Well, but again, if you're an agency and you're needing to debug INP, on hundreds of sites, it makes sense to pay for something like this for sure. So it depends on your budget. And again, if you're just have one site you're trying to fix INP on, utilize their trial, take all the advantage of the data you can. But they give you so much data, so it makes sense why they're charging for this stuff, because nobody else can give you this data. Okay, so yeah, one of the first things is quickly spot offending URLs. So here, this is their RUM tool, and you can use this for all the other metrics too, but we're just going to look at INP. You can see they're easily showing me each URL, and then primary domains. That one here, I just have the screenshot actually down here. You can see this is where we're going to start diving in with TBT and the scripts, third-party scripts. But as you can see, now this example here in the screenshot is actually from DebugBear's own tutorial from their website. But as you can see, they're running Google Tag Manager on their website, and that's actually causing INP issues. So as you can see, it's not a script on their own site. They're running intercom to plausible. These are actually causing INP for their website. So you got to think that it's not just mobile menus like we were going over. It's and I'll dive into kind of why that is, like why third-party scripts. We'll do that here with TBT. But third-party scripts are a huge cause of INP. So, and that's bad news, I know, for a lot of folks, because a lot of times you might not be able to fix all that. But again, yeah, they give a great example of showing you the domains, and I'll show you a couple free ways to grab that here later too, actually. And then they show you a couple user interactions. Let me draw into one over here first.
Once I saw plausible on the list, I was thinking about, I use Fathom Analytics, and I was wondering how that did. Obviously I'm not drilling down to anything, but the INP on the admin bar's website's at 122 in the Core Web Vitals data, so 122 milliseconds. So I'm in the green.
So you're in the green, yeah. So I mean that's good, yeah. I'm sure it's causing a little bit, but yeah, probably. But that's why it's important. Like as you can see in that example, plausible. That one there, you can see it only had one view, and it's a huge spike. So that one's probably something from like a delay or something, like a variance that's I wouldn't count that as a. So yeah, because plausible I think is pretty small, to be honest. Let me just dive into here. Even I'm learning their tool a little bit here. Oh yeah, okay, so pull here. So like you can dive, basically you can go into Bugbear in the RUM tool after it's gathered this data, go filter by the URL, and it will show you interactions happening. And that will actually show you INP with each interaction. Now, also, if you look at these, some of these is INP from text. So it's not just interactive elements. It can be just a click on a piece of text. So you got to keep that in mind too. So that's why we'll go over a few things here later, but that's why it's like just using quality products like GeneratePress and keeping your HTML small. All this stuff really, really matters when it comes down to how much time is being taken up here. Clicks here. But as you can see, you can dive into this more. It will actually go into the INP components. And then I liked, let's see here. They have, let me clear here. Breakdowns. So you can break this down by element type, which is kind of cool. You can, on the site, I think I was running this on Worker, but I didn't have any actually external domains running. So I didn't have any there, but it will show you the domains there, the browsers, operating systems. So you can really dive down into any of these things with this. This will give you more data than you're going to get probably anywhere else. Let me see here. And of course, trends over time and all this type of stuff. But yeah, definitely I would take a look at this if you're trying to figure out, maybe you know where you think the INP is coming from, but you need to drill down further into it and like confirm that, like, okay, this is causing the issue. And then maybe, you know, like maybe you need to reach out to that developer and say like, hey, why is I see that like your product is flagging for INP on my site? Like, so definitely utilize RUM tools and all those other tools I showed you before. And then there's a couple other things I'll show you too with TBT that impacts INP. So next, we're going to dive into total blocking time. And again, the reason we combine these presentations is TBT goes hand in hand with INP. And hopefully after these next two slides, you'll kind of understand why. But TBT is a metric that measures how long the main thread of a web page is blocked during the longest period of time when the page is loading. I know that's a mouthful, but we're going to go on some chef restaurant examples here again to dumb it down. So imagine your web page like as the busy chef. That's the main thread. So when it's cooking or loading, you sometimes need to focus. It needs to focus on another task for a while it's cooking. And long tasks, anything you're penalized for are those over 50 milliseconds. Okay, anything over 50 milliseconds, that's considered a long task. So during this time, the chef basically can't take new orders from customers. And that's the user interactions. So hopefully that kind of makes sense there.
Sure. Like, so if the user continues to click on something else, but that other thing hasn't finished yet,
already going,
can't do the second thing yet.
It can't do the next thing. Yeah. So yeah, if the cook is already doing something else, it's got to wait before it can do the next thing, type of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. So, and TBT measures how long the chef is too busy to take orders during the most critical phase when customers are trying to interact with like the menu itself or the web page in this instance. So this graph here basically shows like the total thread time on this site is 560 milliseconds. But the blocking time is 345 milliseconds. And that's the red ones here. Those are the ones that are over 50 milliseconds. And that's just the threshold that Google's deeming, you know, over 50 is blocking, essentially. That's what they deem as bad. And TBT is classified as it's a notable metric is what they call it. So it's not an official core web vitals metric. You're not penalized on it, but of course, everything going on with TBT here is, and we'll dive into this here too, is going to impact INP. And why is this important? The goal is to minimize this time so the web page feels responsive, you know, so things aren't waiting for other things to finish as much. If TBT is too high, yeah, it means users have to wait too long before they can scroll, click, type, you know, things like that. Any questions there? Hopefully that makes sense.
No, I get it. I've been watching Bear, so all the analogies are working well for me.
Okay, that's the easiest way I could think about it when I even used Grok to spit out like a couple other examples, but the chef one was kind of the easiest thing I could figure out.
We can all picture that one. That's a good one.
So then how does TBT impact INP? So if a user interacts with a page during a period when the main thread is blocked, as measured by TBT, the browser will need to wait for these long tasks to finish before it can process the interaction and update the UI. So basically, if something is blocked, as you said before, it might need to wait longer to make that paint happen, for that end paint of a mobile menu or something to happen. And that's what's increasing the INP. So, and those two parts kind of things, the delayed processing, the longer the main thread is blocked, the more likely it is that the user interactions will have to wait. So the higher the blocking time, the longer probably the user interactions will be having to take. And then for visual feedback, INP includes not just the input delay, but also the next time for the next paint, which provides a visual feedback. So the high TBT can result in high INP because the browser might not be able to paint the frame properly. Those are kind of the delayed and the visual feedback are kind of the same, but essentially a high TBT, high INP. That's
Right.
if you want to dumb it down. And they're not always coinciding, but 95% of the time, I see sites with high TBT have high INP and vice versa.
Right. Because if your site's blocking, it's too busy to do the next thing. There's no way that next score is going to be good, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And kind of before, I think TBT kind of also interacted with FID or first input delay, but I don't think a lot of people focused on FID before. At least I never got any tickets about people like, how do I optimize my first input delay? I didn't get a lot of tickets about that. But now that INP is out, I'm getting tickets about like, how do I optimize INP, which then goes back to now you need to start looking at TBT more if you weren't before. So these things go hand in hand. So minimizing TBT is incredibly important for reducing delays in INP. And according to Google, they want you to have a TBT of 200 milliseconds or less. And this accounts for if you're care about the total score, which in PageSpeed Insights, which I don't think is as important as passing or failing. But if you do, TBT makes up 30% of that whole score. So if you have clients that are, for some reason, focused just on that 100 score, keep that in mind. TBT is a big chunk of that. Okay, so now we're going to dive into what you can do to improve TBT and INP. So the first thing to do is you can delay JavaScript on user interaction using something like our Perfmatters plugin. And you will see a big difference in TBT. I have examples here on site that I ran. I don't know how hard that is to see, but before it was 2.7 seconds for the JavaScript execution. And then again, it dropped down to 0.3 from red to gray, essentially, after delay. And it makes sense because it's delayed on user interaction. And the way to do that here, if you've never used Perfmatters, is we have our JavaScript section here. We have our delay. You can do individual scripts or you can do delay all. I actually recommend using delay all if you're trying to go for the best performance. And then sometimes you might need some exclusions. We have a lot of docs on our sites here about this. We've gone over it in previous presentations, some too. So like check out all the previous stuff. We're not going to focus on that too much here. Just know that this feature is there. I do recommend using it. We use it on all of our sites. And it will help with TBT. However, the caveat here is because how INP is measured, if you think about it, can be user interactions at any point in time and any element. Delaying JS doesn't necessarily help INP in every case, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because it could be after JavaScript has interacted already. So
it's most likely going to be after because you're going to already have scrolled on the page to find something to click, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. So delaying JS is not like a magical fix for INP. And just because it helped TBT in this case, it might not help INP because of how INP is measured. So just keep that in mind. It's still good to always fix all the TBT issues for other reasons as well. But like, just keep that in mind that fixing TBT with delay JS might not fix INP. Then you have minimize main thread. And I'm kind of going through all the warnings that you see in PageSpeed Insights that folks see. And like, they're curious about like, what do I do about these? The minimize main thread one is focused on TBT. And the main things you can do to minimize this is, again, delay JS on user interaction, minify JavaScript. Again, this is something we have in Perfmatters now. You just toggle it on. Usually doesn't have many issues at all either. Minify CSS. Again, we have that in Perfmatters here. Remove unused CSS. Again, we have that as well. And then disable plugins that shouldn't be loading at all. So there are still a lot of plugins that simply load site-wide. Sometimes developers don't do this intentionally. They do it because I always use the short code example. There's no way in WordPress, and some of this ties into how blocks work too, but not as much. But say you have a short code on a site, the developer in WordPress has no way to actually query if a short code exists on a site, which is crazy. There is no way to query that in WordPress. So the developer might have to load something everywhere, just assuming that you might put that short code anywhere. Otherwise, they would break. It sucks. Blocks are getting a little better with the queuing and stuff like that. But like, again, short codes aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And so developers still have to think about those for backwards compatibility. So sometimes developers aren't purposely like trying to hurt your performance or thinking that, or not thinking about it, but that's why they might be doing it sometimes, is for things like shortcodes and stuff. But again, if you know shortcodes aren't loading here from that plugin, you can go into our script manager in Perfmatters and actually, let me show that. I'll turn that on here. Actually, let me just pull this up here. Just lost my staging site.
Of course. It's live, so it's got to happen. Something's got to go wrong.
Yeah, I'll pull up our doc here. So we have a script manager in Perfmatters. You can go in there, click through things. This is an old screenshot, looks a little better than this now, but you can go into our script manager, toggle things on or off, disable, on, site-wide, add exclusions. You can really fine-tune like where things are loading where. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. Do all these other things first, and then like I usually recommend using the script manager last to fine-tune things, because some of these other features might just clean up things for you automatically. But so those are all things that you can kind of use to minimize the main thread work. And then keeping your HTML doc size as small as possible. And we'll go into that here a little in the next slides. Okay, before we do the HTML, I have avoid long main thread tasks. So again, you can utilize delay.js for this, but I also have to put the caveat here too, that with how INP is measured, this might not be a magical fix again. But it is good to identify where these are coming from for INP. So what I like to use for this is, and you don't need a rum tool for this, is, let me pull up. For some reason, this does not show in Safari. So if you're using the Bugbear for this, just know I think they have a bug. It only shows in their Chrome version. This is just in the Bugbear speed test tool. So completely free, but I love their tool for looking at like total blocking time and CPU time. But if you run their tool, you can see CPU time by request, and this will actually show you those third-party networks. So I guarantee you this is impacting INP. So this is a great way to just like run through the speed test. It will show you all these and the amount of CPU time. And the cool thing is here in this tool, this is the one thing that does not show up for some reason. I think they have a bug, but you can hover over here. I don't know if it's hard to see there, but it will actually show you which URLs are where in the timeline. And see, you can see here, right, the s1.wp.com is an external site on this, and you can see the CPU task duration was 178 milliseconds. So great way to look if you have third-party scripts running, how much CPU time is coming from that script. And I think I'm hearing an echo on my end. I don't know if anyone else.
I'm not hearing an echo over here, but if anybody else is put it in the chat if you're having audio issues. But on this end, it's okay. Some echo coming through. Let me look
keep
on my
talking
end.
to see if it goes away. But yeah, debug bear, use that graph, only works in Chrome. You can see the CPU time and INP duration for each third-party domain. Super important. I can't stress it enough because it's very hard to find that sometimes in other tools. And if you're running like AdSense, Google AdSense, like that would be super helpful to see like how much that's actually impacting things. I think the echo is gone. So whatever, I don't know if you did anything, but
okay, good.
And then let me show you, I have another. Oh yeah. Another way to kind of get the same data is web page test. So if you run a site through their tool, it's kind of here at the bottom, and like I've never liked web pages test UI. It's kind of like from 1995, but if you scroll over here, we can see these are third-party requests. And if I sort it by CPU time, again, TBT, INP, you want to look at CPU time. You can see the highest CPU time offenders. So these are the ones that are like going to be kind of impacting INP. Like these are the things you want to look at. And you can see here on this site, it's almost all third-party script related. You could probably go down and
it's
get
always
into
the Google tools at the top of the list. Every time we've done one of these presentations, it's always the worst offender.
I think if you drill down, this happens to be WordPress.com site, and I didn't use it for any specific reason. But this is their UI is horrible here, but you can scroll it over. But this is a script on their own site. So after you get through all I guess with their main site here too, but after you get through all the third-party scripts, like you can see they do have INP probably coming at some level, CPU time involved with some of their JS scripts. But yeah, third-party scripts, as you can see, that is going to be the biggest offender for INP and TBT. Oh, and one other thing about that then too, I know this is kind of technical, but it's hard to find this data sometimes, so that's why I wanted to show it. There's this, I don't remember, it's his name's right there. Paul Calvino launched this tool recently. It's basically a tool to analyze the web page test that's analyzing your site. So you take the web page test URL, you throw it in his tool, and then he'll spit out other data, like render blocking domains before LCP, which is kind of cool. But this data here at the bottom is kind of one that I wanted to see. But he will even show you like amount of data that's happening before the FCP and LCP. Some really cool just stats in here. And like some of their stuff, like how much is loading before LCP. Like anything before LCP would in turn probably be impacting your LCP time. But again, what I'm concerned with on this one is these CPU compile times. So all this stuff and CPU evaluate, CPU execute. All these times are going to be like impacting TBT and INP at some level. And again, if you look, it's all these third-party scripts. But just kind of another way to look at the web page test data and have a few different statistics that they don't actually even show either too. So I recommend definitely using both of these tools.
I wonder how effective it would be to then take that and put it into ChatGPT and say, explain it to me like I'm 5 years old.
Yeah, we're like 5 tools deep.
Yeah.
At this point, yeah. But yeah, basically the main thing is it's super useful to see worst offenders. And if you can narrow it down to like Google Tag Manager is the worst offender, you can easily say like, okay, let me turn Google Tag Manager off for a few days, or let me deploy the script manually without Google Tag Manager and just see the impacts of that. So that there are ways you could test, like, is that going to fix your INP? Like maybe that's a magical fix right there, just doing that in a different way. Because I do see a lot of people running Tag Manager and they're only deploying one script. That is not what you want to do. If you're only deploying one script, deploy it directly. And if you can, host it on your own CDN if it's something you can do that with. But Tag Manager is meant to use for agencies that don't have direct access to a site that are deploying multiple tracking scripts that need to change them at different times. That's what Tag Manager is meant for. It's not meant for a better way to deploy one script. If that makes sense.
Gotcha. Well, I try to avoid it, so I'm all right.
Adding just extra overhead, yeah. And that's very visible in these tests that we just went over. And yeah, third-party code. So we kind of the same fix for all this stuff before we went over. But again, the biggest offenders for INP that I have seen since March is Google AdSense, Raptive, which was previously AdThrive, BlogHer. I don't know how you say that one. It's BlogHer, I think. Mediavine. And nothing against any of those networks. I had a Mediavine site. I love what Mediavine does. I highly recommend them if you need to run an ad network site. But again, based on what they have to load with ads, like they will impact your INP. So what I recommend in those cases, sometimes is, reaching out to the ad network and putting pressure on them to make their code better. And Mediavine out of those, in my opinion, is the best. And they have done a lot of work on improving performance. And Mediavine also has a thing called Journey now for sites under 10,000 visitors a month for like low traffic sites. So if you want to run an ad network and don't have a lot of traffic, they have this thing now that you can get into called Journey for that. So this is last point here. Oh yeah, just another reminder that fixing the TBT won't always fix INP issues if you're using Delay.js stuff. So next is keeping your HTML doc size small and the number of DOM elements. And I think I forgot to put this in here. I'll try to sneak this in before I give you the slides. But the reason this is important is think of DOM, the DOM as just all the HTML elements on the page. These are basically your DOM elements. And the more you have, the more the CPU time has to take to render all of these, calculate these equations to render these elements. So higher DOM size, basically higher CPU time spent to render all these elements. So that's why you want to keep your HTML size smaller, because you'll have fewer DOM elements, which means less CPU time, which means less TBT, less INP. And just a few tips for minimizing your HTML size is one obvious solution is cut back the length of your pages. Like if you can split it into 2 pages, better. Don't just long is not always better. Like if you have a WooCommerce homepage, like instead of adding 5 products on 5 rows, like cut it back to just 3. Stuff like that, little tweaks like that can make a huge difference as far as how many DOM elements there are and can impact things like TBT. Always use lightweight themes, coded with performance in mind. I know Kyle stresses this a lot too. Generate press and generate blocks, or generate press 1 is what I think they're calling it now. Can't stress that enough how important it is to use something like that. Cadence and cadence blocks, they're doing good work too. Bricks is another one I like. And
I just got a sneak peek at some new stuff coming in to generate blocks, and it's getting more powerful, and the code's getting even slimmer. It's pretty freaking amazing. It's almost as if you just wrote the HTML yourself. It's really cool.
See, and that's the one thing I love about Generate Press is because lots of changelogs have optimization to code.
Right.
And that's just so important to be not just launching new features that are adding more code, is to go back and fix things or think about it the right way from the get-go.
They're getting down to the point where, like, when you add a container block to the page, the HTML just outputs a div. Like, I mean, you can change the tag, but by default, a div, no class on it, no nothing, just a straight up div, nothing added to it. It's pretty cool.
So yeah, I love hearing that, and I had no clue that was coming. So I'm assuming you'll probably have a video, or maybe you do already.
Yeah, I probably wasn't even supposed to say anything, but right now.
Okay. Well, I'll have to watch that video. Next thing is don't just inline everything possible. So A lot of tendencies these days I see from people just dumping everything inline. It's not always the best strategy. Having your HTML page smaller is important for so many reasons. LCP, every metric basically. And again, we have like things in Perfmatters for external style sheets for remove unused CSS instead of just inlining the CSS. Same goes for SVG code, and we have in, I forget which presentation was that, one of the ones we did with Kyle. We go in some cool tools you can use to like optimize your SVG code.
Yeah.
Which I recommend going back and looking. There's a slide on fonts that we did. But that's a great way you can kind of fine tune your HTML. Utilize the script manager, so less things are dumping things in the inline code. Our MU mode, which is more powerful in the script manager, actually disables the entire plugin, not just script. So it'll dequeue any inline code, queries, everything. It will turn the whole plugin off. And then pay attention to the number of HTML elements. And then I just have an example here. Was working on a site where someone had 60,000 DOM elements on a page. The HTML size was 700 kilobytes, and it was due to a spam issue. So it was fixable. Like I pointed it out, and he was able to quickly fix it once he realized what was happening. But like his performance just tanked overnight because of that, just from the HTML doc size increasing. That was the only thing that changed. And yeah, his TBT, I should have forgot what that was, but the TBT, and that was off the charts. It was crazy.
It's amazing how quick all the DOM elements can add up to. And I mean, I've been using Generate Blocks for a long time, but they've made the last couple of big updates have made improvements to the amount of DOM elements that get added, right? Like originally, anytime you added a container, there was actually two containers and one was kind of nested inside the other, and it was invisible in the UI, but it was actually there in the code. And I know some of the admin bars site is built with some of those original setups in there that I probably need to go back and fix, because our homepage isn't super long. It's maybe like 6 or 7 different sections of content, but I will often, when I run page speed insights, I'll get a notice about excessive DOM size, 854 elements on our homepage. And I think if I refactored all that with the newer blocks, I could probably bring that down quite a bit.
Well, an 850 is pretty good. I mean, compared to the sites I see from clients that I'm working on.
Well, I think give me a little orange dot next to it, so it must not love it.
I think I'm trying to remember. I think 800 is gray. Anything over that is orange, and then I think 1200 is red. I think that's
gotcha.
That's the benchmarks. And again, the DOM thing is one thing I think Google's very strict on, and it's something that like I would look at and try to optimize. But again, like even if you're in the red, like if you have a long blog post, even with a great tool like GeneratePress, like you might just have a lot of elements like on a long blog post.
Sure.
And like so even that, like it might just have a big DOM because of that reason alone, even if it's a well-coded site. So like don't always think it's always necessarily a bad thing if that's in the red. But definitely see if you can improve anything there. And then here's a good example actually is we launched this new feature called Lazy Elements. A couple other optimization plugins have started doing this too. Is think of this like lazy loading. So yeah, the more HTML elements you have, the more time is spent, leading to higher TBT. So this will essentially lazy load HTML elements and everything inside of it, just like lazy loading. And we have this. This is a new beta feature. So
I was gonna say I don't think I've played with this one yet.
I think I found my dev site again here.
But I live on the edge, so I'll just turn it on live right now and just see what the hell happens.
This is under lazy loading. So in our plugin, you just check it on, and then you have to add the selector or the class. And actually, let me go to our site here.
So you have to manually decide what you want to.
You do. We're not doing auto. I think there's another plugin that's trying to do automatic, but well, Safari has some weird icon issues here. I'll have to look at that. But yeah, it's so wonky that we might think about automating some of this later, but like right now it's still in beta and we're doing it. We want to see what happens here over some time on the client sites. And we've already had quite a few big sites that we've tested this on and fixed a few little nitpicky things. But
so I'm guessing the footer is a pretty safe one if you want to just.
Yeah, so the footer is an example. And so another way that we have, though, is I was going to show this example is I think this is generate blocks or generate press. Maybe you can tell I don't do a lot of designing.
That's
or
just
this is
default
core.
in WordPress.
As core? Okay, yeah. So that's even better. But we have this alternative class. You can just add our class on an element if you have this toggled on, and then it will lazy load it. So you don't have to like go back and forth, between.
That's even better.
So like you could just, as you're designing, like just add this class on something and do it. And yeah, if that's core, that's
so what's our safe area? Like how far down the page? I'm sure it's your risk tolerance there, right? But
well, and so what I recommend. So let me go through this troubleshooting thing first because I want to give some caveats before everyone just goes, "Oh my god!" and goes.
I'm already saving the page. I already got shit. Lazy elements going on the admin bar site live, man.
That's why I'm going to do this.
That's what you're afraid of.
Is just like lazy loading. You don't want to do things above the fold, if that makes sense. So like, don't do this on elements that are above the fold. Like, it's only things like when you scroll down. And again, I usually recommend focusing just on mobile because a lot of sites won't have DOM issues on desktop. I mean, you could try optimizing, but in my opinion, I tend to focus all my efforts on mobile these days because desktop is usually pretty fine. So I would look at mobile first because that's where the big gains will be had. And it might be the same class too, anyways. So it could be the same, but let's go through these really quick. Just nothing above the fold. Try not to, at this very moment in time, try not to do this on dynamic elements like sliders. We are actually working on a way. I think we might be able to fix it to get this working with that, but it's not quite there yet. So it might be in a future update. But like if you do this on a Revolution slider, like that breaks Revolution slider currently. Now, again, we think we might have a fix for the dynamic stuff, but like.
So even like a query loop?
That might be okay. On some basic things. So it's not everything. A query loop might be okay. But like what I think I like to use as examples is like, say you have 3 things across maybe. And maybe that's 3 DOM elements with like nested elements underneath if you look at the code. So added up together, that might be 9, 12 elements just in this one row halfway down a page. If you could lazy load those 12 DOM elements, like, I mean, that's good. And that will have an impact. So I like to look at the sections, kind of think of it as sections on the page and look at the static ones first here. But I think we tested query loops and I think that worked fine actually. And again, a footer,
if not
footer. Okay. Yeah. And we want to know, cause we're actively like fixing this kind of as it goes, as it's in beta. Footer is another example. But again, I will say a caveat here too is we aren't entirely sure how Google is going to treat this with SEO stuff too. Now, how we do it is it's basically wrapped in a no script tag. It's exactly how lazy loading works. Google scrapes with lazy loading. Google can scrape no script content. So, when you're using lazy loading with images, the images that are lazy loading are still indexed. Just because you lazy loading them, it doesn't actually hurt your SEO. And that's because Google still scrapes no script tags and still indexes them. So my personal opinion, I think it's going to be the same way here. The robots crawler, I've already tested this myself. Google sees the content that we're lazy loading in the HTML element, if that makes sense. I just can't say 100% for sure, if they're going to still index that content that's in the no script tag. They see it, but again, I don't know. So I'll probably have more data on this over time. I'm actually going to try to do an aggressive test on my workup site. I'm just going to try it. I'm going to do the comment section on my blogs. And because there are some of my blog posts, actually, let me give you an example here. But again, just keep this in mind because, I don't want someone's SEO to tank just because they,
It's all your fault, Brian.
but like, see here,
I
this,
lazy loaded the body tag and now my site's not indexed
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, please don't do that. And if you do the body tag, at least you will see something visually break because that's stuff about, you'll see something break with that. But here on this blog post, you can see this is a super long page. Let me get down here, but see all these comments here.
Yeah.
These are all DOM elements. And if you look at the code themselves, there's probably 3 or 4 nested elements in every one of those things. So you're talking, 30 times 3, you're looking at what is it, 90? You're talking 100 probably DOM elements at least, just with the comments here. And a lot of my blog posts, since I don't blog very much, tend to have a lot of comments on them because I don't have a lot of time to put out content. So a lot of my traffic is more focused on just higher quality long form content. I'm going to try it there. And I'm going to see, I'll probably do that this weekend. And I will see, maybe I'll have more answers over the next month or two because comments do impact SEO. And there's a lot of content there in those comments.
Sure.
So we'll see what happens.
User-generated content, that seems like the only thing Google wants to put in search these days. Like everything's Reddit. So it seems like user-generated content, they like that.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to do this. We'll see what happens. Worst case scenario, maybe it does impact a little and I might reverse the change. But again, just keep that in mind. I would tend to more use it on like something in the footer, like you said, like a query loop with 3 things with images where they have a few nested elements, maybe like testimonial thingies, I don't know. Just keep that in mind. Be careful with it. But it can drastically reduce your DOM size. This was actually on a client side example that we worked with. Now he's still in the red, but he went from 1,740 DOM elements down to 1,377. And this was just like with a small little change that we made. This was on a massive site. But that alone is helping his other metrics like TBT and stuff. So for us, it wasn't a matter of like getting him out of the red. It was just like making some improvements because his site was so large.
Right.
So we were seeing what that was going to do first. So yeah, give that feature a try. If you have any bugs with it, reach out. Again, there with the dynamic stuff like JS sliders and things, we're working on seeing if we can add more compatibility with that. But okay, so additional tips here, just a few other things when it comes to optimizing INP. Everything pretty much has to do with JavaScript CPU time. Be careful with the third-party scripts. Again, can't stress how important it is to use the quality code, lightweight themes, plugins. And I like this example here. Let me see if I have this up still. Harry Roberts is a guy I like to follow. He's got a lot of, if you're on the more technical side, he posts a lot of great performance related stuff. But here was an example if he gave that was hurting INP on his own site. And it was just how the accordion was coded wrong, that it was actually impacting INP time based on how it was recalculating. But see how fine grained it can get with some of this INP stuff. Like it can be just badly coded JS on an accordion. Like that could be impacting INP. So just keep all of that in mind. It all matters.
I think the thing that alerts me the most to that is like, it's often these random plugins we find in the repo when we just need this one thing that's like outside of our normal stack. Those are usually interactive things or things that are doing some kind of function on the website. And I don't go through the code and make sure that they've like thought about their INP before they put this free plugin in the repo, right? So I imagine there's probably a lot of bad examples of that if you're using random plugins from wherever,
Yeah. And even I can't look at a new plugin and be like, well, how do I test the INP on this without it running on my own site?
Right.
So for me, what I do to evaluate plugins, I 100% always looked at the size of the scripts that they're loading. That almost always tells me what I need to know. Because the people that really care about performance are always going to be the ones that try to get those scripts as low as possible. GeneratePress is a great example of that. They have the smallest scripts of any solution out there on the market. I can confidently say that. There's a reason for that. As Tom over there has, like, they care about performance like more than anything. And so they look at that. So script size, great way to kind of just get a general rule, like it's probably going to be better with INP if it has low script size. Oh yeah, let's go over this next then. Is for the Perfmatters, for when you're using delay all. There is one thing with delay all JS that could potentially hurt your INP. I want to make this very clear. Is if you have this is mainly on large complex sites. So like WooCommerce sites, if you're running like a Veda, think of the big worst offender sites. But like if you're running delay all JS, we have this thing called click delay. So normally when you click delay all, basically all these event listeners still have to fire off after our thing kicks in. And sometimes that can cause a slight delay. So like a mobile menu might take a little longer on a large Aveda site if you're using our delay.js feature. So we have this feature called disable click delay. This is under the advanced menu, and you can go on our docs on our site if you want to know more about this. But you can enable that. However, it does require that you have the proper exclusions for whatever like theme that you're running up here first.
Okay.
So if you have any issues with it, so like with GeneratePress, I don't think it even requires any exclusions to just turn this on because of how well GeneratePress is just coded. But again, on GeneratePress, you might not even need this turned on at all either. So it's really more complex sites that you might want to take. If you're having problems with INP, first off, look if you're having problems with INP. If you're using our delay all JS already, take a look to see if you have disable click delay on or not. If you don't, you might want to think about turning this on first. And the best way to test it is turn it on, see if everything works okay. Like, does the mobile menu still click fine? Does everything work fine? If it does, you might already have the proper exclusions or quick exclusions set up for that. If you don't, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to always track down exclusions for you. I will urge you try not to reach out today, just because it is already Friday and I still got to work on my newsletter here right after this. But we always respond super, super fast during the business week, and always feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help. I think Kyle will attest that like we try to help. We try to go above and beyond, and I'll point out other things on your site that you should fix too. So if you're happy, you know about that.
I think that that Love Perfmatters thread this week was talking about the support too. So that usually comes up.
Okay, cool. Next thing, having more dynamic elements can hurt you. This is a given, but like try to reduce animations, sliders, pop-ups when you can get rid of them. Always the best thing to do. And now here's another trick. Now I've tested this a few times myself and seen it work, but you might want to play around with this. If you're running a lot of third-party scripts, so like Facebook Pixel, Google Tag Manager, Analytics, I think, there's this thing called Zares from Cloudflare. It's not free, but it's free up to like 1 million. I forgot how they call it. 1 million kickoffs of the thing happening, or 1 million times of it happening. It's plenty for most folks. You'll be fine in you won't be charged anything basically. And then it's super, super cheap if you get over like 1 million a month in interactions for this. But basically what it does is it takes like Google Analytics and it deploys it entirely from the edge cloud on Cloudflare. And it takes it entirely out of your browser. So basically it's like you're loading Google Analytics, but it's not going to block the main thread on your site at all. It's all done outside of the browser. It's really, really cool actually. And so this will like reduce your INP and TBT.
So that's even better than like loading Google Analytics locally, which you can do through Perfmatters as well.
Potentially, yes. Now the issue is Zaras does load something on your site for this to make that work. So there's some trade-offs with this.
Okay.
However, I would say it depends on how heavy of the things you're running on there. So with Google Analytics, it might make a difference actually, because Analytics I think is 106 kilobytes right now. G4, it's horrible. So 104 kilobytes, if you can offload the processing of that entirely to the edge, it might be better than loading it locally.
Okay.
Now Fathom, it's not going to probably do anything with, or it's not even worth bothering with Fathom, because Fathom script is like what, 2 kilobytes or 3 kilobytes or something. It's really small.
Very small.
Yeah. However, you can't just dump anything over onto Zaras too. It's more complex than that. And when you dive into it, you'll kind of see what I mean. What they have is like already built apps. So they'll have like, I'm using Google Analytics. I want to use the app for Google Analytics. Like I'm using Pinterest Pixel. So I want to use the Zaras Pinterest Pixel app. Like people at Cloudflare have already made apps for these popular things. So you can deploy custom code through there, but again, there's some other rabbit holes I won't go down, that it's more complicated than just saying, oh, I'll just dump everything on Zaras and do that way. It's not as easy as that. But if you're using some of the popular things, you might want to look at just running them through that. Again, it is almost like magic, to be honest, because it will not block the thread while still loading it and not in the browser from your own site. It is pretty cool. So yeah, experiment with that. And I think we'll see more things like that coming down the road as things progress. Like I think Cloudflare will keep improving Zaras and stuff like that, because it's just, if you can do everything at the edge, it just makes more sense. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it. So like here, I'm going to just go through a quick bullet summary of INP. So it's all about the web page's responsiveness on interaction to paint. Extensive tasks and more complex event handlers can result in higher INP. Google wants your INP under 200 milliseconds. There is no lab data for INP, only real user data, and that's because it's based on multiple user interactions on the site over time. However, there are some tools that we went over, like the Bugbear, to measure INP on the fly. And then a RUM tool is always the best way if you're really wanting to kind of mimic what Google is scoring you on to do that. Pinpoint harder, complex INP problems. TBT and INP go hand in hand. So you want to I always like trying to optimize TBT, and that will hopefully improve my INP. Google wants your TBT under 200 milliseconds. Utilize delay.js and Perfmatters to significantly decrease your TBT time, but remember that it might not always impact INP. But again, just because it might not doesn't mean you shouldn't still do optimized TBT. Other optimizations, minifying JS, minifying CSS, removing unused CSS always help with things like this. Disabling plugins that shouldn't be loading where they aren't needed. Third-party ad networks are almost always the cause of the highest INP. And I've seen this firsthand working on hundreds, if not thousands of tickets since March when they rolled out INP. And we work on a lot of Mediavine sites, a lot of Raptive sites, and a lot of sites using Google AdSense. Reducing the DOM size can help. And you can utilize, like lazy elements in Perfmatters now, which is in beta, like play around with that. That can help you optimize the DOM a little bit more. And then experiment with tools like Cloudflare Zaras to offload the JS entirely to the edge, not in the browser. Again, this is kind of like magic a little bit, but it will probably only be a solution if you're using some of these popular things like Facebook Pixel, Analytics, Pinterest Pixel. I think they have maybe around 50 apps at the moment, so you can go look at their website. And I don't know if they actually list them on the website. You got to go click into your site in Cloudflare, click on Zaras on the bottom left, and then it will show you the apps. So if anyone's poking around right now trying to find the apps. And then remember, of course, not everything has to be perfect. I always say this. Real user data can take a while to show up. Again, 28 days sometimes. So it's not like an instant thing. Always try to make progress over time rather than just thinking it's an instant fix for everything. And then you can monitor this in the PageSpeed Insights using the Origin tab, Google Search Console as well. So yeah, I think that is it.
I got a few questions here from the chat, and if anybody has any more, drop them in there. I was going to ask you, are there? We went over a lot of things here as far as the bad culprits for INP and TBT issues. So if we just had to make a list of those, we talked about like third-party scripts and stuff that we can't control. Things that are using JavaScript should like cue you into these could be potential problems. So interactive elements. So I guess like practical examples, you mentioned sliders several times. I'm guessing pop-ups, since you're probably clicking a button to trigger a pop, not automatic pop-ups, but like pop-ups you're triggering, modals you're triggering.
Yeah, and then another one that Google actually themselves just made an improvement for just for INP problems was their new Google consent thing that they launched, a couple months back. That was causing huge INP problems across lots of huge enterprise sites like Fortune 500 companies. And so they released a fix. The big guys get the fixes,
Sure,
of course, for INP with their Google consent thing, because that was, as you said, it's like a cookie thing, was causing INP issues with what it was clicking. But yeah, like you said, sliders, cookie prompts, pop-ups, mobile menus.
What about things like
anything
forms?
Interactions?
Could forms cause issues here?
Form, yeah, definitely forms do it. Okay. Because forms have a lot of we went into kind of those event listener things, and those event handlers will fire off when you are clicking on things, and the JS then is loading behind the scenes, and based on how well that the form is coded, like that could impact the INP. So yeah, forms are definitely a big thing. I always say try to keep forms off of main pages, but I know it's not always possible. So I like to keep a form on my contact page, but I know, lots of people will have a form on the bottom of their site on every single page. I hate doing that because then you're getting hit with the contact form performance on every single site or page. So.
Sure. I was just sitting here thinking how valuable it would be to have like you're not going to do this, unfortunately, because you have like a business and a brand and relationships with other companies, but a Brian's list of all the plugins that are like Brian approved, like a little smiling you with a thumbs up. And then all the shit list ones, you with a little thumbs down. If you want to mask that through the admin bar, nobody's watching, and we can make that happen, because I would love to have that list.
Oh, and I will say one thing about that. I do try to keep this updated quite a bit. It's the performance checklist, and I do mention a lot of the plugins. There's probably at least 70 plugins mentioned in this page. Excellent. That I approve of, that I'm using, and then I also have this little section here, like don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and I try not to. I don't like name bashing folks, of course. Sure. So, but like Lottie animations, horrible. Lottie is just it's a bad one. GZAP, and I don't mind throwing Revolution Slider under the bus, I guess.
They're not coming after you, I don't think.
They're yeah, Revolution Slider is just the worst of the slider plugins as far as performance goes, and yeah, I'll try to. Oh, and actually, I just added this one just the other day. I think Massimo. I'll just give him a shout out, since he reaches out to us a lot and gives some tips. He's a client of ours too, and he does a lot of performance optimization for his own clients. And this is a new kind of Lightbox and Galagemery block, but it's a very good one, very lightweight. And so I try to add these things here on our sites, but check out the performance checklist. I won't ever publicly do a don't use this one checklist, just because
the admin bar is totally open to that anonymous kind of content. No problem. We got you. All right, a couple questions here from the chat. Frederick asked, "What are your suggestions for handling ad networks and performance optimization?" So I guess if somebody comes to you and says, "I'm running a bunch of ads on my website," what are the first things you're going to as far as trying to fix performance issues?
So for like Google Ads themselves, if you're just deploying Google AdSense, I still say delay the ads if you can. Like still do that because that's going to impact other performance things like LCP, first load time. It's going to impact a lot of other stuff. So like always do that. And like delaying the ads will fix a lot of the TBT stuff you're seeing. However, it might not fix the INP. So with Google AdSense, I mean, your really only option at that point, if you're using the JS from Google that they give you, your only option is to go think about like, can I load less ads at this point in certain places I'm currently loading, or that's really your only options. Now, I will say if you're utilizing ad networks, Mediavine, like I said before, is the best one performance-wise. Out of all the ones out there that you can choose from, Mediavine's the best. And they're always improving things with performance-related issues like this. They're looking at Core Web Vitals all the time. They even have Core Web Vitals settings in their Mediavine plugin stuff. So if you have to use one, Mediavine's the best. And what you can do too, like I always say, reach out to the developers. Like the more tickets they get about things, the more they will fix it. Like we do the same thing. The more we hear about problems, the more priority we put on those problems. So like don't ever be afraid to reach out to developers thinking it's not going to do anything.
Right.
Like hopefully they're tracking it somewhere and like they will hopefully prioritize that at some point. So, INP though, unfortunately, like with ad networks, like it does come down to the quality of the JS and how they're loading the ads. So
he had a follow up to that one too. He said, if you were to give some tips for ad networks and optimizing on their end, what would that be? So if you had the magic wand and you could go to all these ad networks and say, stop doing this and do this instead, what would those top things be?
Well, that's a hard one because a lot of the things too impact money. And so, like I had a Mediavine site ourselves for a while, and you can choose like whether you want to like load video ads or just text ads. So like things like that will probably impact INP because the JS required and things to load the videos is more intensive CPU wise than just text ads. So what I would tell Mediavine themselves is I would actually just say here's what I would do if it was me is I would go to the few examples we use in the thing like web page test, look at those domains showing the INP, or Debugbear is even a better one where they had that timeline where you can hover over and see like here's the INP task duration from this external domain. Use that example. And if you show that the Mediavine domain is in there, I would send them that so that just to remind them that like this is causing direct INP related tasks on my site. Now, again, how they go about fixing that technically on their side is a whole another rabbit hole that I don't even know everything that they're doing.
And I'm sure their incentives line up with yours in the most part, right? The
100%.
more people that visit your website, the more money they're making too. So their incentives to make these things probably as lightweight as possible. But you're balancing that slider between more money, faster website, more money, faster website. So I'm sure they're probably on the more money side.
Well, and this comes down to the same thing too of like why you want to use quality plugins and themes like GeneratePress because they're doing it the best, in my opinion. It's the same with the ad networks. In my opinion, Mediavine's doing the best. So that's why I would use them over some of their other competitors.
Sure.
They're all competing for performance too, because they know everybody's looking at Core Web Vitals. So none of them want to be hurting for Core Web Vitals.
All right. We got one more question here. Christian asked, will a cookie consent solution actually end up helping you with some of these solutions, especially I guess if people click off of the cookie consent or deny any of the cookies, all those things aren't going to fire? Is that potentially helping you when somebody denies your cookies?
Oh, actually, that's a really great question. I would have done a whole slide on that. So yeah, if you have a cookie solution, let's just say you hit a site and you say you don't want the marketing cookies or whatever the option, you want the don't accept all the cookies. So at that point in time, the cookie solution is probably going to be blocking some of these other scripts that are loading, like Facebook Pixel, Pinterest Pixel, all these other things. So at that point in time, it could technically improve your INP and TBT going from that point in time as they're bouncing around the site, which then is measured by, could be show up in Core Web Vitals. So like, yeah, technically a cookie solution, if you think about that, could help you improve these metrics. If the person is like saying, I don't want to see the marketing cookies type of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I never even thought about that, but yeah, it technically could. Now the problem is some cookie solutions have their own performance problem, as I'm sure you know, and so then it's a little trade-off. But yeah, that is a good point regarding the cookie thing. It could help you. Yes.
I mean, the less cookies and things you can load on the website, the better, anyway. So, for privacy reasons, for performance reasons, do we really need all the data we're collecting on our websites? Probably not. We probably over collect, so it's not a bad idea.
Well, and talking about that a little more about the cookie idea is it's not just INP and TBT. That will help all metrics. Like if they reject the marketing cookies, like that's going to impact first load time, could impact LCP, like all that stuff could improve. So if you're using a cookie solution with a blocking method, definitely at least utilize the full blocking thing in there to get rid of those. The problem is too, you lose data then, I guess, too. So there's a trade-off with that as well. There's always trade-offs with this stuff. So
the marketing people don't like that, but screw them.
Yeah. But I mean, I went to Fathom on our sites because I just wanted to get away from now I know not every client has that option, especially agencies when they're working with people that just want Google Analytics. But like, if you have the ability to move away from these tools, like look at Fathom, there's other free alternatives too out there if you don't want to pay for one, that are doing what Fathom does, that have like a 3 kilobyte, analytics script that works with WordPress. Those are out there. And yeah, there's other solutions you can use that aren't doing all this cookie stuff.
Yeah, I moved all my clients over to Fathom, save for a couple that are like running Google Ads or something and needed all that data to talk. But for the vast majority of small business, Joe the plumber down the street, he doesn't need the Google Analytics data. The Fathom is perfect. He wants to know how many people are visiting the site, how long are they staying there, what pages are popular. All that's in Fathom, and you get rid of the performance issues and the privacy issues. So this one's supposed to be a commercial for that, but I would highly recommend it.
Well, and Fathom, I had an issue with actually Fathom but they just fixed it. So I would give them a shout out as far as they just added like the ability to better see first attribution of where someone landed on your site, where they came from. Before it was kind of getting overwritten sometimes, and now you can kind of track the path down more when they're hitting your site. So it can be helpful if you have like a goal set up in Fathom for like a form or something. Like, it's better to see like, oh, did that come from, did it come from X or from Facebook, stuff like that. So
Sure.
Give them a shout out.
Excellent. Well, Brian, I know I wore you out with 5 episodes in this series, but I think it turned out really awesome. I feel like this is a great resource for years to come. This is something that I know I'll be going back and revisiting when I need a refresher 6 months down the road, when I can't remember what TBT stands for. I'll remember the cooking analogy, so at least we'll have that. But I can't thank you enough for not only the series, but you do a ton for the admin bar and supporting. And like I said, I'll send you that thread that I was talking about from this week. There's a lot of love for Perfmatters inside the admin bar community too, and I just want to thank you a whole bunch for always helping us out. Cool. I'll remind everybody here, if you don't have Perfmatters yet and you use that coupon code there, you'll save 20%. So that's never bad. And before Brian goes and finishes up his newsletter for the day, brianleejackson.com, hit the newsletter button. You can sign up there too. That's a great newsletter, not only for what they're doing with Perfmatters and NovaShare, but everything that's on Brian's mind for the month. So see, I kept my mouth zipped right there. I was going to say it, but I didn't. So you'll get all kinds of insights when you sign up.
Won't say anything, but yeah, it'll be. I do mention a few things that are coming out, personal opinions. There you go. It'll be going out later today. So.
We have one quick question, and then I'll let you go.
Oh, sure.
Heinrich asked, "What is Brian's Forms plugin recommendation? What do you use for Forms?"
Okay, so I'll give you 2 opinions on this. I use WS Form from what's it? I always forget.
Boom, right there, Mark Westgard.
Yeah, Mark Westgard. Yeah, I love his plugin, and I would say you can literally do anything in that plugin imaginable. I don't know how he keeps track of all of his things. Now, I will say, though, his plugin is not the fastest or lightweight one out there. So it depends on your workflow. So while I use WS Form, I use it because I only have our contact form on our contact pages. And I was needing to do more advanced things that the other forms did not give me. Like I needed to do attachments that go to Google Drive, like some of these things for our tickets that were just super, super helpful. And his plugin does that awesome. Now, if I was going just from a performance point of view, don't need all the crazy workflow stuff, I would actually go with probably Fluent Forms is who I would use. If you were just going for size and you just need basic stuff, I would go with Fluent Forms. So it depends on what your workflow is, what you need performance-wise. But again, if you just have one contact form and it's just on your contact page, I say go for the one that gives you the most options sometimes, because it's just one page on your site. And for us, the contact page is the most important page on our site, to be honest, because that's where all of our tickets come in through. So it's very important. We don't even optimize that page. We've just turned delay.js off. We've turned off almost all the optimizations with Perfmatters, even just because we don't want to mess with anything on that page.
Yeah, it's not worth the risk on there. Awesome.
Yeah,
Mark will be glad. He's got a shout out. Both of those plugin or form plugins you mentioned both have free versions and pro versions. So if you haven't tested either one of those out, you can go into the repo and download one of those and play around with it. And I have a video with Mark on the channel, maybe 2 different videos with him on there. So there's some fun stuff to find on there as well. So. Yeah. Well, sweet, Brian. I appreciate it. Thank you again. I won't bug you to ask you to do 5 videos for me in the span of a few months for at least, I don't know, I'll give you through the end of the year, but next year we'll have to collaborate on something new, but I'll give you some time off,
That would be nice. I'm not going to lie. These were a lot of work just between my regular workflow, because we do have I'm either doing tickets, development, or documentation. That's my life, basically. Right. And so, to squeeze in presentations sometimes is a little hard, but I'm really glad that we did this. I even learned things doing this, like even even with this presentation, like I dove into it a little deeper than I had done in the past. And these have been helpful even for me. And I really hope it's helpful for everybody else. And hopefully they'll stay evergreen as long as possible. I tried to keep that in mind, while we were doing these.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching on here today. Like I said, this has already been added to the playlist. So if you go to that Perfmatters playlist, we have several videos we did before and then this whole Vitality series. So hope everybody has an awesome weekend. If you're in the path of this big storm that's rolled through, hopefully you guys are staying safe there. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.